I fear this video will be literally like taking candy from a baby. Welcome to Co-op Dropout, where we dive into Mormon lore with critical thinking, humor, and no garments required. Let's go there. If you missed it in one of my last videos, this channel, Co-op Dropout, is not actually what I do. This is kind of just a passion project of mine. What I do is I'm actually a health and fitness coach of 7 years. So today, I'm actually going to go over the health benefits of caffeine, coffee, sugar, the Word of Wisdom, all that stuff. So we're going to go ahead and get into it. According to the LDS website, the Lord revealed the Word of Wisdom that the Word of Wisdom that the following substances are harmful: alcoholic drinks, tobacco, tea, and coffee. The Lord promises increased health, wisdom, knowledge, and protection to those who obey the Word of Wisdom. Now, in past videos, I have discussed how simple questions like why can we not drink coffee, things like that, before they didn't really make sense. There wasn't really an answer besides just plain obedience. And that's one of the reasons why I left initially with simple things, not only this question, but simple things like this question that couldn't really seem to be answered. And before you ask, this is also the same exact page of the LDS website, which will be linked below, but a screenshot that says Word of Wisdom. God revealed the Word of Wisdom as a commandment for the physical and spiritual benefits of his children. Now, many people in the comment section on my YouTube videos, my TikToks, anything like that, they're like, oh, that the coffee thing is not a rule, or it's not a commandment, or this or that. If that were the case, then why is it also on the temple recommend questions? It says, do you understand and obey the Word of Wisdom? And for those who don't know, on the temple recommend questions, if you get any of them wrong, you can't have a valid temple recommend and go to the temple, aka God's literal house. And in Mormon doctrine, that is your access to the celestial kingdom. You'll also see in this screenshot, the prophet Joseph Smith revealed this revelation on February 27th, 1833, and is now recorded in section 89 of the Doctrine and Covenants. In the revelation, the Lord teaches healthy practices, also prohibits substances that are not good for the human body. So they're claiming those substances that are listed are not good for the human body. Obviously, like alcohol, tobacco, things like that. Like, yeah, those aren't like necessarily good for you. But the coffee and the tea one, people get hung up on. So we're going to go ahead and actually get into the benefits of coffee. Now, the daily recommended allowance is like 200 to 400 milligrams of caffeine, usually about a cap of 400 milligrams of caffeine. But you can technically have up to like 1,000 milligrams of caffeine in a day and be fine, as long as you're not drinking it all in one sitting. If it's just throughout the day, and be fine. I don't really recommend it, just because there's such thing as a caffeine cap, where it's like you hit a certain amount and go higher. You're just kind of having more caffeine without the benefits necessarily. You're just kind of having more caffeine. But we're going to start on coffee first. Coffee is really high in antioxidants, and it's really high in anti-inflammatory properties. Ironically, the three top highest beverages in antioxidants, or top 3 beverages highest in antioxidants, are coffee and tea. Against the Mormon Health Code is what they call it, a Mormon Health Code, but they forget, and they forget to mention that it is a commandment. Coffee and tea, and the third one is red wine. Actually, those are the beverages that are the highest in antioxidants. Obviously, we drink within healthy moderation, like 1 glass of wine, 1 to 2 cups of coffee, things like that. Moderate consumption of coffee, about 2 to 4 cups a day, can lead to lower risk of all-cause mortality, increasing the life expectancy by 7 to 15%. All-cause mortality meaning like all of the chronic health diseases, actually. So like liver, heart, brain, things like that. Kidneys, all that stuff. So moderate consumption. If you guys can tell my voice, I was sick last week. I'm still struggling a little bit with congestion, so I apologize there. But the show must go on. So moderate consumption of coffee can increase your life expectancy by 7 to 15% due to the anti-inflammatory properties of coffee and the antioxidants in coffee. Coffee increases dopamine. This can happen with just 1 cup of coffee. 1 cup is approximately 95 milligrams of caffeine. There's even sodas that are the same amount of caffeine. With an even larger study on Science Direct showing 2 to 3 cups of coffee can lower the risk for anxiety and depression, actually. And again, all of these links and these research articles and these scientific studies will be in the links below. Coffee can improve energy levels. Obviously, it's a stimulant. Okay, caffeine. The way caffeine works in the coffee or in the soda or in whatever, the way caffeine works is caffeine as a molecule goes in and blocks your adenosine receptors, and when your adenosine receptors are blocked, that can give you that more of awareness feeling, because adenosine receptors basically are what makes you feel tired. Just to really simplify it. So caffeine goes and it blocks the adenosine receptors and can provide alertness for you. This is especially helpful in the early hours of the day, as caffeine is going to help you with your alertness and getting up and getting going in the morning. And then also there is a half-life to caffeine. So having a caffeine curfew is something that I actually even recommend to a lot of my clients, because caffeine does have a half-life. And with the half-life, you want to cut caffeine at a certain time in the day just so you can optimize your sleep. That's really it. The stimulant in coffee and caffeine is especially helpful for athletes. It can help improve endurance sports and sports performance. Moderate coffee consumption can improve your liver health through antioxidants and anti-inflammatory pathways. So your liver and your kidney. The antioxidants and the anti-inflammatory pathways, they will help your kidney and your liver in these ways. They can improve liver enzymes, help your liver break down sugar, and prevent fat storage, which fat storage in the liver can give you non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. Reduce the risk of fibrosis, which often comes downstream of fatty liver disease. Reduce the risk of liver cancer. Like the liver, the kidney is the same way. So drinking coffee can lower chronic kidney disease. It can reduce the likelihood of protein leaking into your urine, aka better kidney function, and lower likelihood of kidney stones. Moderate coffee consumption can also lower the risk of Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease, and can lower the risk of type 2 diabetes. So coffee is not bad for you. Coffee is not bad for you at all. So there's so many people in my comments on YouTube, on TikTok, just recently talking about the caffeine is not a commandment. You're not supposed to, there's no rule saying you can't have caffeine. I can do whatever I want, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Whatever. I mean, I showed you the church's website. I showed you that it's called a commandment specifically. I showed you that it says coffee and tea. Is literally right there in front of your eyes. And plenty of speeches on it. Or talks, I should say. Talks is what Mormons call them. A general conference and stuff. If it's not the coffee, though, is it the caffeine? Are you allowed to have caffeine? Are you not allowed to have caffeine? I see so many Mormons drinking energy drinks and saying and claiming that energy drinks are okay, but coffee is bad. According to David O. McKay, which if you don't know who David O. McKay is, he is one of the church prophets, and the church prophethood, you're literally the mouthpiece of God, giving God's word and God's revelation to the people. So the fact that this is signed by David O. McKay is insane evidence that the prophet himself wrote to this bishop who was inquiring about Sanka coffee. One of his members was drinking Sanka coffee, and they didn't know if that broke the word of wisdom or not, so she could get a temple recommend. Okay? That's how the streamline goes. And the prophet wrote to them and said, the first presidency wrote to them, first one on the list that signed is David O. McKay. This yellow highlighted portion, I'm going to read a little bit before that. I'm just going to read that little paragraph. For your information, please be advised that the drinking of a beverage made from the coffee bean, like the Sanka coffee, from which the caffeine and the delirious drugs have been removed, is not a violation of the word of wisdom, and the drinking of Sanka is not justifiable reason for context being to not give her a temple recommend. That was the original question. It says that. For denying a temple recommend to who is otherwise worthy. So David O. McKay himself is saying it's not the coffee bean, it's the caffeine and the delirious drugs in it. I don't know. The church website says coffee and tea. The church website says it is a commandment. The temple recommend says you have to obey the word of wisdom to get a temple recommend. I mean, I guess you can always just lie to your bishop and get a temple recommend, which actually, to be fair, I know tons of people that do. But that's in the doctrine. That is the doctrine. That is the gospel. So anyway, let's just take a deeper dive into caffeine. If caffeine is the issue, let's see what's so wrong with caffeine. There's tons of benefits, health benefits to caffeine. In moderate consumption, about 200 to 400 milligrams a day. I'm just reading from my notes I prepared for this video. And all the links you can find, again, from the scientific studies and things like that, you can find in the description box below. 200 to 400 is like the recommended daily allowance. You can even be fine up to 1,000 milligrams a day, which is 1 gram of caffeine a day. Not all at one sitting, but if you're having 1,000 milligrams of caffeine through the day, if you're an otherwise healthy adult, you will be totally fine. I wouldn't recommend pushing it over that high, really, just because there is such thing as a caffeine cap. And the caffeine cap, once you get past a certain milligram for your body, there's just not really the benefit that comes with the additional caffeine. So you're kind of just having the additional caffeine for no reason. But in that moderate amount, that 200 to 400 milligram a day is actually a really healthy place and can benefit, like I said, sports performance, endurance, things like that. God gave us plants and seeds for consumption. Caffeine is actually found in more than 60 plant species globally. In Genesis 1:29, God actually discusses, behold, I have given you every herb bearing seed, which is upon the face of the earth, and every tree in which the fruit of a tree yielding seed, to you it shall be for meat, meaning food, meaning consumption. Caffeine is metabolized in the small intestine, and the small intestine's job is to absorb from the food and the drink that you're consuming and absorb nutrients and absorb all that stuff and put it to where it's supposed to go in the body, right? That is the job of the small intestine. So within 30 minutes, your body has metabolized caffeine, and it has a half-life about 3 to 5 hours. This is also why me, even as a fitness coach, if my clients, I'm trying to help them really prioritize their sleep, for example, I give them what I call a caffeine curfew, which is, okay, have caffeine in the morning and cut your caffeine off at a certain time of day. That way they can just optimize their sleep later in the day. A single dose of caffeine, typically 200 milligrams, is a non-threat to people without comorbidity. I can't say this word. Comorbidity. Comorbidity. Right here. It's a tongue tire. And a single dose of 300 to 400 milligrams all at once. Now, that is a little bit more expensive. If you're having like a 400 milligram dose all at once, which you can get from energy drinks and pre-workouts, which ironically Mormons are allowed to have, but they can't have coffee, all at one time, it can cause restlessness, nervousness, excitement, insomnia, facial flushing, increased urination, GI disorders, muscle tremors, irritability, erythema, tricardia, etc. And I wrote in my notes, I got it a little ahead of myself. You're really only going to find that high of a dose, not in a cup of coffee, but in an energy drink, in a pre-workout, and some other form of stimulant. Fat burner stimulants, which I know plenty of Mormons who take fat burners. There's caffeine in there as well. So if it's not the coffee, according to the church's website, but it's the caffeine according to the church's prophet. But caffeine and coffee are both good for you. So to me, it doesn't really matter. I'm just trying to prove a point. In low doses, around 200 milligrams or 2 cups of coffee, because there's about 95-ish milligrams per cup. About 200 milligrams per cup of coffee, there is really only positive benefits. Higher concentrations, like 400 milligrams all at once or higher than 400 in a day, is more associated with the negative side effects. Higher concentrations are more often found in energy drinks pre-workouts. I don't know why I wrote that in here twice, so sorry about that. But maybe I'm just really trying to hit the point home. Who knows? Because Mormons drink energy drinks like it's nothing. And then you might see some Mormons say, well, isn't coffee and caffeine addictive? Okay, if it's the caffeine is addictive. Okay, but coffee is addictive. Or one of the most common things I see people say is, it's crazy because it's most often a joke when people are like, oh, I just can't get my day started without my cup of coffee. And Mormons take that and they're like, oh, you just can't get your day started without a cup of coffee. You're addicted to it. And they say, isn't coffee addicting though? People can't even function without coffee. And then I say, you know what's more addicting than coffee? You know what's more addicting than caffeine? By the way, the negative side effects of coffee and caffeine are only if you're consuming it in like crazy amounts, by the way. which most people are not. Most people drink about 2 to 4 cups a day, like 2 usually, 4 maybe if they're out running errands, doing things, socializing, whatever. You know what's more addicting than coffee and caffeine? Sugar. Sugar is significantly more addicting than caffeine and coffee. Sugar is more addictive than cocaine. Why would I bring up sugar? When I was a Mormon, there's a heavy refreshments at social situations, at meetings. There's always refreshments afterwards. They're like donuts and pastries and this and that, sweet treats. Mormons love sweet treats. They love sugar. Mormons love sugar. They can't have coffee. They can't have alcohol. They can't have caffeine, but they do. They can't have vices. So sugar is a Mormon's vice. Have you heard of swig? Have you heard of crumble cookie? Swig and crumble cookie are both Mormon owned. Not Mormon owned as in the church owns them, but Mormons own them. And it's because, in business, you see a need, you solve a need. The need is their need to follow the Word of Wisdom, which the Word of Wisdom says nothing about excess sugar. Excessive sugar consumption leads to higher risk in all-cause mortality. All-cause mortality. Diabetes, heart disease, cognitive function and impairment, increased risk of dementia. Sugar-induced impairments in cognitive function is even shown independently to obesity or weight gain. What that means is that even without obesity, even without weight gain, you don't have to be overweight, but excess sugar intake can literally impair your cognitive function, affecting mood, memory, recognition, concentration. Sugar can also lead to a huge issue in gut dysbiosis. And if you guys are unfamiliar with gut dysbiosis, what that basically means is an imbalance in your gut microbiome. And it's an imbalance of your good and bad bacteria in your butt, in your butt. I mean, I guess kind of. I'm going to leave that in here just because that's funny. In your gut microbiome, basically your bad bacteria is taking over your good bacteria, so on and so forth. This can affect your gut health, your brain health, your skin. For those who don't know, your gut and your brain are directly linked via your vagus nerve. Your vagus nerve, that's why they call your gut your second brain. So if you're completely just like overloading, which they say you can't get a sugar hangover. Yes, you can. You're overloading your brain, your gut, all this stuff, your whole body with sugar. It's going to reflect on your skin, everywhere. Your teeth, like they can literally rot. That can also happen with meth, but Are they in the same category, sugar and meth? I'm just being dramatic there, guys. Okay, I'm just being dramatic. I like to be fun and funny on this channel, okay? I'm just being dramatic. But sugar is a problem, and sugar is a culture in Mormonism. Sugar is a whole culture in Mormonism. So sugar is not, listen, okay, coffee and caffeine, that is doctrine. That is Mormon doctrine, 100%. Sugar culture, sugar in Mormonism is cultural. That's not doctrinal. But let's get into the cultural Mormon obsession with sugar, shall we? And you better believe I will be calculating the calorie load on all of this as well, from one crumble cookie and one swig drink. Now we're going to watch this TikTok of this guy who is going to try out swig and crumble cookie. Here we go.
I'm a British Latter-day Saint and I'm visiting Utah, and everyone keeps telling me about swig and crumble. So I've come to see what all the fuss is about.
Over 40% of Utah's population are Latter-day Saints, which makes the rise of chains like swig and crumble especially interesting, considering our faith's observance of a health code called the Word of Wisdom.
Can I just say it's really funny that he is saying their observance of the health code as he's picking up a box of 4 cookies that are 600 to like 900 calories each.
They're absolutely massive. I've gone for the churro cookie and I didn't expect how big they would be. So let's see. It's heavy. Even after one bite, it's quite heavy and I feel like I need to go into a coma. Okay, now we're at swig. And honestly, I'm looking at the menu, these dirty sodas. They sound disgusting, and I really don't fancy it after crumble. But
props to him for not being impressed by the swig and the crumble like craze. Probably because he's British, because British people have a lot more, they're a lot more health conscious than Americans are.
I'm gonna give it a try. Thank you. Okay, let's try it. I got the tropic.
I honestly felt like the sugar was burning my mouth.
It just tastes, oh my gosh, that tastes incredibly sweet.
So I'm going to look at the nutrition information. So this right here is the churro crumble cookie that he just got. Looks good, sure, but I'm not exaggerating. If you never had a crumble cookie, they're literally like this big. Not exaggerating. Now the nutrition facts of that one cookie, I looked at that exact cookie. 7 grams of protein, 33 grams of fat. For those who don't know, 1 gram of fat is 9 calories, so that adds up pretty quick. 1 gram of protein is 4 calories. 1 gram of carbs is 4 calories. 118 grams of carbs. 72 grams of sugar in this one cookie, but 850 calories for this one cookie. Just so you guys know, whenever you're reading nutrition labels, 2,000 calories a day is at the bottom right here, is used for general nutrition advice, but calorie needs may vary like person to person. That's true. The recommended daily allowance, though, when you're looking at foods, is based off of a 2,000 calorie diet. An 850 calorie cookie is already almost half of that calorie allowance. Okay, now we're going to look at the swig. I did look up his exact drink, but it just, when I was looking it up, it just wanted me to order it. But I did find this swig drink sizes and calories. What he had probably looked like a 16 to 12 ounce, 12 to 16 ounce. He got a smaller one. So what he had, 10 to 150 calories, depending on the soda. I'm going to go ahead and go off of a medium and large because I feel like most places are getting a medium or a large. Let's be real. You stop at a gas station to get a fountain drink, you're probably going to get a 32 to 24 or 32 to 44 ounce. So the large, extra large. So actually, I'm just going to look at those. Based on the soda that you pick for a 32 ounce, you can get 40 to 350 calories, depending on the soda alone. For the extra large, the 44 ounce, 60 to 500 calories alone. And I know that's actually probably the swig that most people get, because anytime I see a swig in a TikTok or anything like that, they're massive. They're more like the 44 ounces, the 32 to 44 ounces. And if you see at the bottom here, customization. So adding cream, coconut purees, extra syrups can increase the calories by 100 to 300 calories, depending on your customization. So let's say that you do get a 32 ounce, let's say. All right. And let's say you picked the higher calorie soda, you got 350 calorie soda, depending on the options they have. And then let's say you did all the fixins, all the customizations, all right, 300 calories addition. That's 650 calories. If you get a 32 ounce swig with all the fixins and say you get a soda that happens to be one of the higher calorie ones, that's 650 calories plus the 850 calorie cookie that you just got. That's 1,500 calories out of like 2,000, which is like the recommended daily allowance for general nutrition advice. One cookie and one swig are over half of your calories that day. And some people might be like, oh yeah, well, I just get the smaller swig, whatever. Almost every single swig that I've seen ever go viral, people have the massive swigs. That's why I'm going off of that. The calorie consumption is insane. That leads to obesity. That leads to chronic health conditions. That leads to higher morbidity rates. Yeah. So sugar is way more harmful than caffeine or coffee. But caffeine and coffee, by the way, whether you want to say it's the caffeine, whether you want to say it's the coffee, doctrinally, another one speaking by the prophet himself, their doctrine saying you can't have coffee, you can't have caffeine. But people want to twist that to how they want it. Sugar is nowhere in the Word of Wisdom, nowhere in the health code. So that's why I said it is funny that he was going up to pick up almost 4,000 calories worth of cookies. And then he said that the reason they do this is because they're honoring the health code and not having coffee or tea. That's just very funny and ironic to me. And we're just going to end on this, the living history, a sugar high that never lasts. Just ask the Mormon Church. I'm going to read this, just talking about the history of Mormons and their obsession with sugar. I'm going to read this in more of a Loom video, though. Hi, guys. Okay, so we're going to get into this a little bit more. This is just kind of funny. It's all right. Mormons have a sweet tooth. You might even call it an addiction. In fact, the history of the history of sugar and the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, habit, sounds like a Breaking Bad version and the production of the distribution of meth. It's like the Breaking Bad of the hit TV show is what it seems like, the sweet tooth and the sugar addiction that Mormons have. One of the staples Mormon pioneers packed on their trek was sugar. Where every ounce counted, a prominent place was found for sugar. The Nauvoo Neighbor published a bill of particulars detailing the items of a family of 5 needed for crossing, for the crossing, like crossing the Great Plains to go to Utah. After flour, 1,000 pounds, sugar held pride of place in pioneer wagons, 100 pounds. Coffee and tea were also recommended, 5 and 1 pounds each, as well as alcohol, 1 gallon. That's crazy, because that goes against the word of wisdom. Who said the word of wisdom again? Oh, yeah. Joseph Smith. That's right. But people refuse to acknowledge that Joseph Smith and Brigham Young and all of them were drinking alcohol. And it looks like probably coffee and tea as well. Like literally in a lot of Joseph Smith's journals, he's talking about how he's having like a drink with someone, like an alcoholic beverage with someone. Anyway, let's just ignore that. That's kind of weird. Rules for me, or rules for thee, but not for me. Is that what they say? Rules for thee, but not for me. My father, who was in federal prison, used to say that. Once here, President Brigham Young envisioned a kingdom where people provided for themselves. Okay. Not bad, not a bad thing, right? That's like, right? I still think Brigham Young is a psychopath personally, but that's not a bad idea. Providing for yourself. The need for sugar from Babylon was an expensive reminder to the saints, or that the saints still had ties to those who want to destroy them. Backstory, if you guys are watching this video and you don't know Mormons, they were kicked out of Missouri with execution order to get them out, basically go on, get, and they got kicked out of basically everywhere they ever were in the Midwest. And then, anyway, so then Brigham Young took all the pioneers and they did a trek to Utah for Utah to be their new home. So it's a reminder that they had ties to those who want to destroy them. Okay, like, that's a fair sentiment. Okay, that's fair. Young's solution was simple. They would cook their own. This is where you get the Breaking Bad reference. They're going to cook their own crystal sugar. It was a complicated chemical process developed in France that involved beets, CO2, lime, and a vacuum chamber. A 50-foot obelisk that now graces the Sugar House neighborhood is a monument to a glorious failure. Young's investment in technology and techniques that worked in Europe proved to be a disaster in Utah. French sugar beets took one taste of Salt Lake soil and screamed, "Quel Herrera," and refused to cooperate. Oh, okay, so I don't read French, but I'm guessing the French sugar beets did not like their soil. After spending a ton of money and only producing some that would take the end of your tongue off, Young finally gave up. The factory that gave Sugar House its name turned to other purposes. But Mormons weren't done with sugar. In the late 1880s, a gifted horticulturist, I think I said that okay, Arthur Stainer, with help from the U.S. Department of Agriculture, collected $5,000 incentive from the Utah legislature for being the first person to coax enough sugar into the Utah-grown beets to make granulated sugar possible. Excuse me. Having developed a way to make crystal sugar, mass production needed 2 things: capital and reliable supply of sugar precursors, beets. Stainer convinced church leaders of the virtue of the project, who in turn cajoled the faithful into investing in the venture and or planting beets. Lehigh leaders won the new factory site, with lavish promises of free land and tax breaks. The LDS Church, almost to its own surprise, found it was itself with a sugar factory that actually made sugar. Satellite plants were built in Provo, West Jordan, Spanish Fork, where beets were crushed and the juices transported in the pipelines to the main Lehigh facility. As in China today, cheap labor in the 1980s or in the 1890s made Utah attractive to American capital to gain access to the national market. The church cut a deal with the Eastern Sugar Baron, who chose Utah over Colorado to expand his empire because the Mormons could control their people. Okay. Because they love control. Anyway, that's why the Mormons could control their people, because Brigham Young loves control. Look into the blood atonement, so you find out about it. Faithful Mormon farmers were willing to accept less than half of their beet harvest than farmers outside of the Intermountain West. In the days before progressive reforms, child labor was common and safety regulations rare. A German sugar maker visited the Lehigh facility and was horrified because child labor. If you were in Germany, you would be thrown in jail, he cried. You've got exposed machinery all over the place. You've got hazards every way you turn. This sounds chaotic. This sounds very like cowboy sugar industry. I'm going to yeehaw peepaw my way through this and make myself some sugar, some crystal sugar. I just imagine Brigham Young with a little cowboy hat on, and it's his frontier, and he's just like, we're making this happen. The Utah, okay, hang on, I got a little carried away there. The Utah and Idaho Sugar Company thrived. World War I drove up the price of sugar, and it became an expression of faith reinforced over the pulpit. For Mormons have a bag of UNI sugar in the pantry. So maybe sugar in Mormonism is a lot deeper rooted than we thought. It might not be doctrine, but it was spoke over the pulpit. That's pretty deep. That's pretty deep, bro. That goes pretty deep. Stake presidents discouraged faithful farmers from selling to competitors, even when they offered much better prices. A church that had flirted with bankruptcy for most of its existence was suddenly flush. So the church struggled with bankruptcy for so long that they started holding grudges against everyone, and the stake presidents discouraged them from selling to competitors, even if they had much better prices. That's petty. But, I respect the petty. Okay, whatever. I don't respect the child labor, but whatever. If it weren't for self-dealing, conflicts of interest, monopolistic practices, kickbacks, stock watering, speculation, price gouging, and abuse of labor, the federal government might have never taken an interest. LDS Church President Joseph F. Smith, by the way, if you guys don't know, that's Joseph Smith's grandson. He's related to the original Joseph Smith. I think it's his grandson. Yeah. Had endured the indignity of the Smoot hearings only to find himself once again in his least favorite place on earth in Washington, D.C., answering for the faith before a government investigative committee. So this is hilarious, actually. I'm glad I picked this article. Just when business-friendly Republican administrators in the 1920s took some of the heat off UNI sugar in the church, the business found itself in trouble. Prices for sugar had plummeted. The UNI was millions of dollars in debt, and ironically, the sugar industry would come to depend on the government policies to continue. Until the LDS Church sold the sugar operation in 1980s. 1980s, that's not long ago. That's like just over 40 years ago. The faith found the sugar business anything but sweet. It endured financial ups and downs, blight, labor trouble, and rise in foreign sugarcane and domestic corn syrup. For a more complete history of the church's troubles, just whatever. Read Religious Politics and Sugar and Mormon. I'm not going to read that other article. This one was already hilarious enough. This guy, great job, this guy. Francisco I'm sorry, I apologize. Francisco, I can't say your name. That's hilarious. If this video made you laugh, think, or cringe, you're welcome for my service. Tap subscribe for more heresy next time.